Hello and welcome. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Kantor of Kantor, a powerhouse California-based firm that has spent decades suing insurance companies for specific high-stakes benefit denials. After growing up on the diet of insurance law, Andrew stepped into family business to transform it from a referral-heavy practice into a modern, data-driven growth engine. Today, we are breaking down the reality of leadership transition, the power of extreme specialization in a crowded market, and how Andrew tripled his monthly intake by fixing one major blind spot in his marketing. We will also dig into his stealth Reddit strategy that turned him into a national authority on long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome. Andrew, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate you inviting me and giving me a chance to chat about all these things. I'm really excited.
Of course, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, you have a very interesting upbringing, being in a family of lawyers and growing with that in mind. And what were your early takes on the future of career in law? Is that something that you are looking forward to, or was it a burden that you had to carry?
Yeah, it's always been something I've been able to look forward to. My parents are Glenn and Lisa Kantor, who started the firm, and not only are they both lawyers, they both specialize in the same area of law, which is ERISA benefits and suing insurance companies for denying claims. So, and they're also the type of people who they've always loved what they did and described it as such. So, we'd be at dinner and my mom would be complaining about a health insurance company and how horrible they were and what she was doing to take them to court. My father would usually be complaining about a earthquake insurance company, often after the 1994 Northridge earthquakes. And to me, it seemed like the coolest thing in the world to be able to be that frustrated and riled up and invigorated about what you're doing. And yeah, they were stressed. My parents have always been stressed in some ways, as many lawyers are. But the enthusiasm about what they were doing, if you were to ask them, is the stress worth it? They'd say, yeah, absolutely. I wish I had less of it. I wish I managed it better. And I hope to do that. But they've always loved what they've done. And in fact, my father has had the chance to retire, and he said, no. And that's a good thing in that he's going to continue doing the kind of law he loves, let me and the other lawyers manage the firm. And seeing him live out his life that way, to say, yeah, I have a choice to retire. I want to keep doing this law because it makes me excited and I like doing it. I think, that's the coolest thing about taking over the firm. I mean, there's lots of cool things about taking over a family business, but that's one of the best.
Was there any one particular maybe case that you witnessed your parents go through when you were younger that cemented that that's amazing, this is exactly what I want to do?
Yeah, I'd say the big one happened when I was pretty young. And when it happened, I was too young to really appreciate what it was. But as I got older and understood what it was, it's the case of VU v. Prudential, where basically what Prudential Insurance Company did after the 1994 earthquake, and some other insurance companies we found out, was after you had an earthquake, you'd call the insurance company and say, I had an earthquake. They would send someone out to assess your damage. The person hired by Prudential would come out and either intentionally or unintentionally say, oh, you have no damage. Okay, the people would believe them. A year or more would pass, and then all of a sudden a foundation would shift or a ceiling would collapse, and all of a sudden they have someone else come out. Oh, look, there's been damage from the earthquake the whole time. People would then file insurance claims with Prudential, and the insurance company would say, they're too late. You only had a year to file this claim, and you blew the deadline. The claimants would say, well, we only blew the deadline because we relied on your adjusters to tell us we had no damage. And Prudential denied these claims all the way up until my father took them to the California Supreme Court in VU v. Prudential and won the case and basically ordered the insurance company to reopen thousands of insurance claims for an earthquake. And to me, all of these people were just minding their business. An earthquake strikes them, their lives are ruined. And then the insurance company that's designed to do one thing screws them all. And these aren't just people. These are my people. I was living in Northridge, California. I was 6 blocks from the epicenter. Our house was red tagged, meaning we couldn't move back in. Basically, a third of it collapsed in from the chimney. And so we had to live in different rental houses for about 2 years while our house was rebuilt. Our family didn't have the money to rebuild the house because my parents had just invested a ton of money into the firm. They didn't have earthquake insurance, and we were saved by FEMA back in the day when FEMA came into Northridge and saved a lot of people by giving us mortgage assistance. So my father not only helped all of these people, they were my people. They were our community. The firm's been in the San Fernando Valley forever. I still live in Granada Hills. So that was just beyond for me. That was just the coolest thing I've ever seen. And it was kind of a no brainer at that point that that's what I wanted to do. The same thing my dad did.
That's very cool, especially when you have something that touches your community and it's so close to home, literally, in this case. I think a lot of younger lawyers, when they go to law school, they have one expectation of what the law is, and then, of course, there is a business of running law. Because you grew up in a family where it is a family business, you probably had more insights than most. But was there anything that shifted in your perspective once you started taking more active role in management of the firm?
Lots of things. So, one thing I learned, I think, about my law firm and many others is that many law firms succeed by doing well at the law, and they aren't necessarily well-run businesses. If you would define a well-run business as far as practices, procedures, data capturing, and they don't have to be. And it's a unique situation where if you're really good at the law and you're getting cases, you don't necessarily have to be that good.
Mhm.
As things shifted and I came into, and I had the opportunity to really focus only on firm management, because it's impossible, in my opinion, to be a full-time litigator and a full-time firm manager. They're two full-time jobs which require your entire emotional being. I've never met someone who can really do both. So I had the opportunity really to focus just on the business side, and I realized there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, not because my parents are dumb people, far from it. They're brilliant, just because they didn't have the time to spend the same kind of energy managing the business that they have in winning cases and helping clients. And so I didn't, the first thing I realized is how little I actually knew, because my parents didn't know as much as I thought they knew. You know, they relied a lot on advisors. They made a lot of traditional decisions, which a lot of other lawyers made. And a lot of the things they did made perfect sense when they were doing it. But there's a lot of decisions that weren't updated. A lot of things, a lot of changes I saw were forced upon us rather than us being ready for certain changes. So I think the biggest thing was just that, wow, it's really impressive how this firm has done so well just by being so good at the law. But oh, wow, how much better can we be if someone actually focuses on the business? And so that's basically what I've been doing for the past 3 years since I've been taking on that mantle.
I think that's very interesting to see that transition because a lot of successful businesses, law firms, and any other business, the success can be blinding because the founder of the company would assume that every decision is the right decision and they could be very resistant to outside advice. In the case of your family, you had different perspective. You were very intentional about spending time on improving other areas of the firm, and that works well. Going forward, how do you keep the same momentum to make sure you're open-minded about anything else that might be helpful to the team and to the firm at large?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it is the mindset you're always approaching things with. I think, as a second generation business owner, I'm approaching the business very differently than my parents did. My parents had to create the business, they had to build the foundations, they had to compete, they just had to do a lot of things that I didn't have to do, but I have a lot of challenges that they don't have to face. I think the easiest way to get stuck in the mindset or any negative mindset is to make sure you're not using your own mindset too much. I mean, that you're sharing these decisions amongst other people. I have basically promoted 4 senior partners. I'm a senior partner. They're senior partners. We all manage the firm together. I have technically final decision making, but I rarely use it because this way we have set up is that they all have so much knowledge and ability in what they're respectively doing. And so much of it flows into the business that it's rare that I'm making a decision without running it by them and getting their
Mhm.
feedback. And I think it's a lot easier for me to do that because I've watched these lawyers invest themselves in the firm for years and years, the same way I was when I was an associate, building my chops. I had basically a guarantee that I was eventually going to run the firm, but they didn't. But they still gave everything they had to the firm. And I still know I can't do what I'm doing without them doing what they're doing. So one of the easiest ways is just to use those people you trust to make sure that multiple brains are running on these important things, and it keeps you fresh. I think the easiest way to start making bad decisions is to isolate yourself, and to get too convinced by your own abilities and forget the fact that you're where you are because of the team, not just because I've made individually good decisions. It's because of all of us.
I think it's interesting to reflect that because I, as a marketer, we are blessed with a very quick feedback loop. Whenever we test something, we very quickly get an answer from the market if we got it right or if we got it wrong. But sometimes in the business, it could take a while, and sometimes you need that feedback. One of the things I'm curious because it's a very interesting structure that you describe how you basically manage the firm together with advice of your peers. Were there any friction points when you started taking management from your parents, when they maybe didn't agree with some of your decisions? And I'm wondering how that conversation was handled. And even right now between your peers, because you listen to their advice, but like you said, you have the final say. How do you handle the difficult conversations when you don't agree with their advice and you have to take the firm different direction?
So when it came to my parents, there are 1,000 things we disagreed on. And my mother was, surprise, surprise, my mother and I got along much better. My father and I disagreed about 1,000 things. I think that there's 1,000 father and sons out there saying, yeah, go figure. It was first an emotional adjustment because early on, him disagreeing felt like a lack of confidence in me. And that's something I had to get over. One of the things that really helped us was we hired a consultant who specializes in family businesses. His name is Jeremy Lurie. I love shouting him out whenever I can. But sometimes when you're in a family dynamic, having a third party specialist kind of walk you through these things can be really critical. Once I stopped seeing him disagreeing with me as him not having faith in me, and once he stopped seeing me disagreeing with him as me not needing him anymore, and we both were just like, hey, we have to, like, Andrew, you got to appreciate how much Glenn has done well. Glenn, you have to appreciate Andrew's going to do a lot of things differently. None of these things mean you aren't on the same team. None of these things mean you aren't like trying to get to the same goal. And once when the tension was really high and we really didn't just agree about something, we always just deferred to mom or, to Lisa, or we always deferred to Jeremy. Like, look, if we really disagree about something, someone needs to break the tie. But that happened less and less. Once you get the big friction points out of the way, especially once he saw some of the things I was suggesting starting to work, then it got a lot easier. And with my senior partners, I'd say there haven't been a ton of situations yet where we fundamentally disagree, like that we're at hard friction points. And to the extent we are, I've mostly deferred to them. And it depends on what the disagreement is about. The disagreement's about something that they're managing. One of my partners manages the bad faith litigation team, for example. Mm-hmm. And so if we disagreed strongly about what we should do about a bad faith litigation matter, I defer to her. I disagree. Hey, my disagreement's noted. I trust you. I'm going to do what you want. If we're talking about marketing, my say is final, but everyone kind of respects that. So there's not really a situation where anyone's going to say, oh, I absolutely believe we need to be doing this from a marketing perspective, because they kind of know that's my area. I think interestingly, one of my senior partners and I were interviewing two people for an administrative assistant position, and we both, I think, want to choose the other person. So I am not sure how we're going to deal with that. I may just defer to her. The reality is there will have to be points where I tell people we have to do this my way. And I hope that I've given them enough respect in every other decision we've made that they know it's not me railroading them. It's me needing to make a decision and move the firm forward the way I need to see it, Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the way I approach that.
That's quite interesting. I might have heard, I believe, from Jeff Bezos, but it might have been somebody else, that idea that you just described, that you have an expert that you rely to and you can disagree with them, but you still agree to follow their plan. And as a team, you want to succeed. So there will not be any "I told you so" or any, trying to create that friction. I guess with the stakeholders in the firm, with the partners, they might have equity in the business, so they have that incentive. How do you involve more junior staff also to be the subject matter experts on different matters, so they build their expertise, so when the time comes, you can also rely on their input?
So our senior partners don't have equity yet. We're working towards that because we're still transferring the firm. The one way we incentivize them is through a transparent kind of bonus structure where they know exactly how much we made in net profit. They know how much they got in bonuses for the years past. They help, and so they know what their bonus is comparatively. And so I'm trying to make sure we pay more bonuses than we have in the past. As far as incentivizing juniors, one of the things we're going to do is publish and this is relatively new, publish a salary hierarchy and basically explain to everyone what everyone makes, tell the juniors what the seniors are making, because we've never done that before, and even tell them their bonuses. Basically, I'm creating a structure where there's a lot more bonus and salary from the senior partners than there are for the juniors, and showing them what happens if you get moved up to senior partner. There is a challenge of how to motivate them to go the extra mile now.
Mhm.
in when ways where I can't promise anyone senior partnership. So how does someone in that position get incentivized? A lot of our focus is not just on compensation, right? You need to have good compensation, you need to have good bonuses, you need to have good benefits. But once you're, tied with 10 other employers who offer the same thing, how do you set yourself apart? And we focus a lot on quality of the employment experience. I really believe that employers make money when their employees are happy. It's often expensive to make your employees happy, but that you make a lot less money when they're unhappy. They leave faster. They're more likely to quiet quit. They're more likely to screw you over one day. And if you have a remote firm like we are, we're almost entirely remote, you have to trust the people you work with, right? It's very easy for people to have, to not do what they say they're doing. But people are mostly good. And if you give them a good work environment, people don't want to screw you over. They don't want to lie. They want to do their work. And so we incentivize people by giving them those basics, by creating an environment where, hey, it's not horrible working here. People are supportive. And so even if there's no promise of senior partnership, you're not miserable right now. And, we also have a system where basically instead of traditional performance reviews every 6 months or every year, we do goal meetings where we talk to the juniors about their goals, where they want to end up. Do they want to be a senior partner? What do they want to learn? Where can they contribute more to the firm? How the firm can support them more? And we find that doing meetings like that helps us hone in on what the juniors actually want and what makes them happy, and help them create those paths, or in some situations, tell them those paths aren't probably going to exist and they should consider something else. So that's how we're focusing on it at this point.
I want to double tap on that because I think it's something that applies both to the culture within, but also to any partnerships relationship in general. There are firms, it's quite standard now, that say those are our goals, this is our budget for the year, this is what we are looking to achieve, those hours. But it's not that common that somebody in leadership will know what the goals of their juniors are, and they will actively help them promote. And we see that within the firms, but interestingly enough, it's also a relationship between, for example, the firm and even the vendors. Because, of course, whenever you buy services from somebody, those are your expectations. But if there is a service where there's a long term relationship, I think it also pays to say, how can we be a great client for you so that you can get the most of working with us? And that will just drive the work and the results for both parties involved. How did you arrive to the structure you have right now? Was that always the case, or where was a moment when you had to rethink and be very intentional about it?
Yeah. So a mix of things. Like my parents have always done a good job of just creating a supportive environment. They've always been good employers. The firm ended up at one point, it was something like 90% female because we kept hiring really capable lawyers who we were willing to give some flexibility to as far as raising their kids. And they said, wow, you're the only firm that'll give us this. I'd love to come work for you. And we to this day have an excellent bullpen of lawyers, a lot of them women, because we give that kind of flexibility. And it's a no-brainer, right? Let someone, take care of their kids and work. It's
Mhm.
very easy for us to do that. So that's always been kind of in the default. But I also, I kind of experienced it myself. Before COVID, I was still an associate and asked for a remote work accommodation. And my father said no. He said, I want you in the office. I want you there full time. And it was a real struggle because I had basically I needed some remote work accommodations. I just needed it to stay focused. I was getting way too distracted at the office, and he had rejected it. Just like I had ultimate job security because I knew my dad would never fire me, he knew I would never complain about the denial of accommodation. So it kind of went under the radar, but it really, really made my work life really difficult for about a year. And I really struggled. And I was usually pretty good at my job, and I just wasn't that year. And it was a really rough year. And then COVID hit. Out of nowhere, COVID hits. And 2 weeks later, our entire office is remote. We shipped out laptops to everyone. We sent everyone home. It was, our version of the operation to get the vaccines out. It was Operation Warp Speed. My mother led it all. It was incredible. And the firm has stayed remote since 2020 or 2021 because it's been so much more efficient. For me personally, it was like the gates to heaven opened up. I became twice as efficient working from home. I was far happier, and it was noticeable how much better things got for me personally. And so I realized, like, wow, I am far more efficient when I'm happy. And I'm supposed to, like, my happiness should almost be guaranteed. Working for my parents, I don't have to worry about job security. I'm guaranteed to be running the firm one day. What do I have to be upset about? But here I am struggling.
Mm.
So I figured if I could struggle in my situation, imagine how hard it must be for someone without the perks that I have. And so that always stuck in me in a big way. And so I figured, hey, if I can give myself these perks and come out the other side, I want to give other people the same kind of support. And it's worked out really well for us so far.
Sounds like it. I think since COVID, because COVID definitely forced a lot more firms that were willing to consider it before remote work, that was a necessary adaptation. Since then, I know a lot of firms actually moved back to hybrid, but hybrid could be 4 days in the office, 1 day remote. And I think the fear probably for a lot of partners is that we don't know if our lawyers will be productive. We don't know if they will be distracted. How do we actually measure that productivity that you felt personally? What sort of the guardrails did you put in place to just make sure that everybody is actually not abusing the system, but on their top game? Was there any actual rationality to the fear that people will misuse that opportunity?
So to answer your last question first, there was definitely some rationality in the fear, but I think, employers generally will say, oh, well, if we let people work from home, maybe half the people will keep working and half will screw around. So we have to have everyone in the office. I'd say, out of our 45 people that were there at the time, we had issues with one or two who we eventually had to let go because we couldn't rely on their performance. And going forward, it became a much bigger priority to hire people we could trust. There are no real guardrails. What we have, the guardrails are the system itself, because with our kind of law, if you're not working, the clients are complaining, the deadlines are being missed, the legal assistants are calling you out. Like, there's just too much work to be done for the lawyers to really slack off and get away with it. And the other thing is that, when lawyers were working in the office, it's not like anyone was looking over their shoulder to see whether they were working or playing on the internet or messing with their phones, right? Like, you have to trust people to get the work done anyways. The other thing is general oversight. Like, I have a much better handle now on who has how many cases, who, what people's deadlines are. I can open up a chart and see how many cases any particular person has at a time. And we have general numbers to know what someone has to have. And for the most part, most people have too many cases anyways. They're trying to weed everyone down. The other thing is that responsiveness. There's so many things that when people are responding to you at the moment, when they're getting work done on time, what do I have to worry about? Hey, if this person's only working 35 hours instead of 40 and they're doing 45 hours of work, do I need to give them 5 more hours of work, or can I just be happy that they're a good worker and that I can trust them? So I really hope we never get to the point where we ever have to the idea of having the click steady software, or having the webcam software, that is a nightmare to me. I really hope we never get anywhere close to doing that. But I do also understand the reality. If you have a 200, 300 person law firm, it may, statistically, you may have to put in something like that. Or, I don't know how I would manage it if our firm got big enough so that I didn't trust every single person who worked for us. That's also one reason I don't have any intention of necessarily pushing to get bigger. I'd certainly love to get more lucrative cases and become more efficient. But I think that's one worry people do have to consider, is that if you've got something good with good people, it's not necessarily all that easy to quickly grow and keep your culture and keep the people with the same mindset. Because all of a sudden, if you have a few people who aren't part of your, don't fit in, things can get really screwed up really quickly. So it's important to make sure you don't grow too fast and you're bringing in people who line up with your culture.
You need to maintain that DNA, because we've certainly, I'm sure everybody has a couple of examples on their mind when a firm grew too quickly and it just dissolved what made them who they are in the early days. What are some of the non-negotiables for you when it comes to having that culture that everybody is on the same page, and what makes Kantor and Kantor you?
Non-negotiables. Oh, I like that question. One is basic decency and respect. We don't tolerate drama in the workplace, gossiping about people, talking bad about people. If I hear from one of my employees that someone else is being unhelpful or combative, like, that's a really big issue. I hear other firms where that's kind of the norm. Like, at lunchtime, everyone just talks crap about each other, and in meetings, they're dishing on each other. That would be so bizarre at our firm. So, and because, if people aren't treating each other with basic respect, how can you trust them to treat the clients the way the clients need to be treated? And our clients are either disabled or have lost a loved one from life insurance, or either require long-term care. So they're all in a really tough spot, and you have to have patience for people like that. If you don't have patience for your coworkers, how are you going to have patience for these clients? So that's definitely one thing. A non-negotiable, this isn't non-negotiable, but I find it to be a really massive indicator of success at our firm, is why you want to work for us. Everyone wants a job to feed their family, right? To get salary. And that's, I hate that interview question. Why do you want to work? Well, I need to eat. But when I hear someone in an interview say, I want to work for your firm because I really like the work you do, and I really like your culture, and I really want to be a part of it, that's a much more exciting thing for me to hear than someone saying, oh, I want to be an ERISA benefit specialist, or, I happen to really want to work for a prestigious firm like yours. Those are all fine answers, and they're honest. But people who want to work and do what we do for the right reasons end up being the people who stay for the long haul. I'd also say that one non-negotiable, to some degree, it has to be emotional intelligence. It kind of goes with patience and combativeness, but so much of our work involves emotional intelligence, not just with managing clients, but with the law. You have to be emotionally intelligent how the law is actually going to apply, because you have to consider how a jury is going to look at a person. And what is, when you really think about it, how is assessing how a jury is going to look at someone? It's emotional intelligence. It's understanding how a group of people will see conduct and how they'll react to it. So knowing that someone's emotionally intelligent generally, I think, makes them a lot better at the work we do.
One of the interesting crossovers between the emotional intelligence and the bedside manners that good lawyers have, which is something not necessarily taught in the law school, and just applying the law, especially when it comes to AI, because AI accelerating how some lawyers are reading the cases, they're preparing for the cases, which might make them faster at reading the law, but arguably worse at actually understanding their clients and being there emotionally. Under your leadership, how do you pair the two, the use of the modern technology and having that EQ touch point that is absolutely essential?
Yeah. So right now, our AI use policy is somewhat limited. I mean, I've given my senior partners and litigators the ability to use our AI tools that are approved by us, however they see is appropriate. And we talk every week basically about our cases. And if anything, I want my lawyers to be using it more than they are. A lot of them are a little older, they're a little more timid of it. And that's totally fine, because that's frankly a safer place for me to be, rather than being over eager. We have limited the use by associates and by paralegals, especially when it comes to the fundamental learning of how they assess cases. We are not anywhere near comfortable enough with the AI tools ability, or our young lawyers or paralegals ability, to be able to assess the AI's work and to know whether it's good enough. I mean, AI could do something that's 99% perfect, screw up one fact, and the case is blown. The entire, and that's, it's just too scary of a dynamic for me to let our young lawyers do that. And nobody really knows at this point how to train young lawyers other than the way we've been doing it. No one knows how to use AI to properly train young lawyers, so we're all afraid of it. And I think that's understandable. I would welcome someone out there to come in and train me or us on, hey, here's how you use AI as a training tool. Here's how you teach young associates to use AI in a way that doesn't shortcut or undermine their knowledge. But, of all the list of things we need to figure out how to do, that it's pretty low on the list. So as of now, we're kind of keeping the young ones away from it, training them the way we train them, and we're taking it 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time. I'm really liking AI for timelines. It's just fantastic for putting together a timeline, slamming dates together, and you can highlight the timeline stuff you really need and then verify it yourself. And it's a great use of AI. I don't know when we'll get to the point of being able to use AI for cases. I don't know if we can ever trust it. The whole point is that you have to know the case exists with your own two eyes. And beyond shepherdizing, I just don't know when the tech's going to get there. And not to slight any of the AI legal companies out there, but the AI legal companies seem to be significantly behind the actual AI companies. Like ChatGPT and Claude seem to be light years ahead of the, I don't want to name the names, but the Westlaw and LexisNexis types things that are implementing those LLMs, because they have to put in so many more, checkpoints basically of how they're doing things. I just don't think it's anywhere close to being there yet. Now, with our clients, I think the fact that we have a very client-focused business is going to make it so I don't think we'll ever replace our paralegals or young lawyers with AI. I don't think there's ever going to be a disabled client who's been screwed out of $15,000 a month and needs help appealing, who's going to be comfortable talking to an AI about their case. Or even talking to the AI, like to hire us. I've gotten, can't tell you the number of emails I've gotten from AI intake companies who want to replace my intake team with AI.
Hmm.
If I lose one or two cases a year to a dumb AI, makes it not worth the investment. So why would I even bother? Our intake team is, they're so good. And they also are, time and time again, people tell me, oh, one of the reasons I chose your firm over this other firm who was really good and nice was your intake people were amazing. They were so nice, so knowledgeable, and they responded to us so quickly. That will never happen with AI. Oh, I should never say never. I age myself as who knows if that'll ever happen with AI. I'm not looking forward to it happening with AI. I don't want it to happen with AI. I think the human aspect at my firm will always be really important, but we'd be fools to not appreciate the AI wave that is coming and use it to our advantage. And I do hope that our paralegals and young lawyers eventually we can all get on the same page about what tools they can use that we're comfortable with, not undermine their training, but we're not there yet.
It's still developing, so we'll have to see what happens. But on the subject of innovation, I want to talk about the marketing and the changes that you've done to the marketing of Kantor and Kantor. The firm, as many law firms, historically has been heavily reliant on referrals. You've made some changes, and it sounds like they paid out. So do you want to cover a little bit what was your approach to decide that something is changing, and how did you think through that process?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I kind of did when looking at the firm was to look at our pay-per-click and to kind of get an understanding of who was managing our pay-per-click services, what our keywords look like, what we were spending, and all of that. And the first and biggest example of lawyers being good at the law but not paying attention to what's going on with the business, we had set these keywords up years ago and no one had really checked on them. No one had adjusted them for locations. No one had adjusted them for efficiency. And the people we were working with at the time weren't really capable of doing it. Someone in-house that we had and someone out of house that we had. We had to we replaced both of them. I'd hired someone new and we hired a brand new pay-per-click expert who basically came in. I worked with him for weeks about telling him about the business, telling him what we were doing, telling him where, and because I had taken over intake, I had the best vision of where all of our cases were coming from, where the good cases were coming from, where we weren't looking. And he basically went through and just revamped everything on our pay-per-click and our keywords. That was about 18 months ago. And as of last month, our raw intakes are up by three times basically. So 200%. And we've had a jump in intakes of retainers signed, which is probably the best metric, of 50% between 2025 and 2024, which is the best measure of our success. So that was by far the biggest thing that we did. And it's incredible because it's, in one hand, such a simple thing. But even when I asked Glenn and Lisa, hey, have you ever looked into this? Have you considered this? That I could, they got confused with the conversation. And again, they're very intelligent people, but if you're not familiar with this stuff, and especially with, I think my parents were, they just didn't like it. It wasn't their thing, where I'm very interested in it. It became very clear how much they needed someone who both knew the law and how the law worked and how the intake process worked and can kind of line them both up. So we were actually bringing cases in that we need. And, one example is like long-term care insurance is insurance which covers basically sick and elderly people when they need an in-home nurse. And those claims are going to skyrocket with the aging population right now. And it's basically, we've almost quadrupled the number of intakes we get in that between last year and this year, partially because of our keyword changes, partially because this is a trend we've been predicting for years. Glenn has been predicting this for years. And we actually just got recent confirmation from an outside source that basically an insurance industry study is expecting the claims to triple in the next 10 years. So already being prepared for that was really helpful. The other thing I did kind of by accident was get involved in Reddit. I've had a Reddit account for 15 years and I've always just kind of chatted with people, answered questions. Whenever someone would ask about long-term disability insurance, I'd answer a question. And then I kind of on a whim asked one of the subreddits if I could get verified as a lawyer because I wanted to do an AMA and answer some questions. And so they verified me, gave me a little sticker next to my name that says I'm actually a disability lawyer. And I did a little AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything. And the AMA went really well. I got like 150 questions, 57,000 views. For those who know Reddit, I think something like 500-ish upvotes, which I think was pretty good. And I didn't think much more of it. It was never a marketing strategy. It was me spending my time doing that instead of doom scrolling. And it was a nice thing to do. But lo and behold, people started messaging me and saying, hey, you did this AMA. Can you give me a free consultation about my denial? Of course, I'd do that for anyone. And people would message me people message me all the time now, just asking me questions. I refer most of them out. Anyone who's not in California, I give them the name of someone else. But if someone's interested in hiring me, they're welcome to reach out and do that. And the numbers show that in 2024, something like 1% to 2% of our retainers signed came from Reddit. In 2025, it was 12%, which was really surprising. But it's one of those unique things that I was able to kind of leverage the account I've had for 15 years that I, used for memes and dumb complaints about political stuff for a decade and a half. And it's worked out really well. It's funny. I run into other long-term disability lawyers. Like some of them will say, I'm a disability lawyer, and that'll be their username. And some will reference themselves as disability lawyers. And I say, okay, let me ask you a question. In California, who's the best and most handsome disability lawyer in the entire state? I think it's Andrew Kantor. He also tells the best jokes. And I'll just mess with them when they get online. And some of them don't realize it's me, and they have to hedge their answers as to be respectful. But Reddit's a lot of fun. It's a really interesting community, and some of the subreddits are really fascinating, especially the disease-specific ones. We handle a lot of chronic fatigue syndrome cases and long COVID cases, and I've done AMAs on those subreddits, and I end up getting a lot of people messaging me and asking me questions. But Reddit is becoming a much bigger, I think, source of social media traffic. And it's almost like AI in some ways, where people are looking to Reddit to get a professional assessment of things from other people, like a groupthink kind of assessment, which often can be a horrible idea because it can lead you in the totally wrong direction. But, sometimes it can lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of interesting points here. And as an outsider, and I'm very biased here, but I think the difference between lawyers that, like yourself, take the time to do MIA session to actually advertise, oftentimes comes from genuine, interest in helping people and giving the information and answering the questions. And I see the smaller firms that are stuck in that referral only cycle. They're not quite doing the service they could be doing for their community because they're just expecting work find them. And if you are aware that there's a new type of case that, for example, will rise and there are more potential clients that will have that question, if you go and meet them halfway by being on a Reddit or advertising for those keywords, you can actually service a lot more people and do more good as well. And back to the point that you said, initially, that reassured you in the right choice of career, seeing how that impacts the communities. Like by advertising, you can actually service better and also drive better business. So it sounds like a win-win.
Yeah, so far it is. Hopefully I can keep it going.
What's been, when you started investigating Google specifically, apart from keywords, were there any parts that were confusing to you? And what was the learning curve like from the point when you decided to dig into having a system that works?
There are lots of things that were confusing to me. Finding the pay-per-click expert that we use. First, I like to think I'm as good of a lawyer as he is a pay-per-click explainer. Like, he really explained everything to me at a really basic level. He showed me the charts, he walked me through everything. And over the next few weeks, he was available to basically answer any questions I had. The learning curve, frankly, because of him, it looked a lot scarier than it ended up being. I thought, he belongs in a university somewhere teaching this stuff. He's been so impressive the whole way. But that's the biggest thing. If any lawyers are watching this, and you're terrified of all of these acronyms and this entire area, I hear you. It is complicated. But getting one person who can explain it to you calmly and confidently can be a complete game changer. So I think that's by far the biggest thing. And I still am very comfortable not understanding all of it. There will be things I don't when I ask him, should we spend more money here? No. Okay, good. If we need to spend more money in these areas, tell me. He's like, and there are times where I'll say, okay, well, this ratio doesn't look very good. And then he'll say, well, you spent only this amount of money the whole year. How many cases did you bring in? Okay, well, I brought in 7 of those kind of cases, which netted me X amount of money. Wow, okay, so that money is worth the investment. And it's really every single area I needed those questions answered, he would answer them. So I think it's manageable when you have help.
One of the question I really like to ask is what makes for a good marketing partner, whether it's an in-house member of the team or it is external. And the two answers that I hear a lot is somebody who can explain without using the jargon, so that you understand what is going on. The second thing I hear quite often is somebody who's proactive. So if there are any changes, they're able to bring new ideas to you and have that discussion. Would you add anything else to the list that makes for a good marketing partner for you?
Yes, there's one that stands out to me immediately, and this is big in my area of the law, is someone who can take the time to understand the nuances of what we do. So, like, for example, we have long-term disability denials, long-term care, life insurance, and long-term care, disability, life, and some health insurance cases as well. We also do pension litigation. Each of these requires a different target market for the most part, different reasons they come to us, and different geographic locations where people would come to us, be more likely to come to us. They also require completely different business development strategies. So we basically need the people working for us in marketing, both with the pay-per-click side and in-house, to understand all of the nuances. For some people, that's a big learning curve as well. I'm sure for my marketing people, it's just as big of a learning curve for them to learn those things, if not bigger, than for me to learn the SEO terms and for the pay-per-click terms. One of the problems, I think, was previously with certain people I worked with, it was very noticeable that after several months, I was still having to explain those core concepts. And at that point, it made me less secure about their understanding of the whole business model. Because if you don't understand the nuances of what we're doing, yeah, it's going to take you a few months to figure it out. I'm not expecting anyone to jump in and understand it, but someone has to be proactive and eager to understand those nuances. And I think sometimes marketers are just easy to chalk it up. Like, oh, there's just two different letters for cases they're bringing in. We can just throw them all together. It's like, no, they're very different. And if you don't understand those, we're going to have some difficulties that we have to discuss. So that's the biggest one.
That's a good point as well. There is just like with the learning curve of figuring out how something works. There's also, of course, the curve and the timeline required to get something to work. And you mentioned that before you started digging in, you already had account active for a while, but nobody was looking at it, so it was just doing its own thing. From the point you started to be very intentional about getting the system to work, to the moment when there's some level of consistency from the number of cases that were coming through, what did the timeline look like to set the realistic expectations for somebody who's listening?
I would say at least a few months for it to be noticeable. Like right after I did the AMA, I got at least, 5 or 6 people who reached out to me immediately. And then it was kind of crickets for a while. And then I posted a few other things here and there. And then it became more consistent and people kept referencing the FAQ. So you'll at least 6 months to see a real kind of flow coming in. And I also, talked to someone recently who specializes more in Reddit than I do. He manages a subreddit. And he's saying that you also, if you're starting from scratch, you need at least kind of a year of history to gain your reputation up and for subreddits to be willing to have you post AMAs. Because often if you don't certify yourself or have a post history, they won't even let you do an AMA. So that's another thing to consider, is that you can't just kind of start an AMA and then expect people to, or start a Reddit account and then expect people to let you just do AMAs. You've got to create an account, answer questions, basically be a Reddit member for a while, earn your cred, and then reach out to someone and so they can look at your profile at the point and say, oh, this isn't someone who's just trying to advertise on Reddit. This is someone who actually is part of the community. Yes, I'll let them do an AMA. But that, of course, requires becoming part of the community and actually contributing and actually answering questions and not being self-promotional. I mean, you really have to go there, try and stay anonymous and just answer questions. I mean, people reach out to you and say, hey, what's your firm website? I want to look at you. There's nothing wrong with saying, oh, this is my firm website. But if you go answer a question, say, hi, I'm Andrew Kantor from KantorLaw.net. This is what we do. You should hire us in response to your issue. Not only is it probably unethical, people who look at your profile, because they do that, will see you as someone who's just out to advertise, and they'll shun you and they'll block you and you won't be a member of the community. So think about it like that.
It requires a level of care, and just using ChatGPT to auto-generate the answers is also a non-starter.
People are rabid right now about AI. I feel bad for some people because I saw one guy who posted on the dad subreddit today and he used M dashes, but he also used terrible punctuation. So I was pretty sure it wasn't AI, and he was posting something pretty heartfelt and everyone was bashing him. Like, stop with this AI garbage, stop with this AI slop. Everyone should stop using M dashes and they'll be believed. But yeah, do not use AI on Reddit. They are they really hate that.
There used to be a very old school marketing technique way before the internet age, when advertisers would intentionally mistype something in an advert to see how many
Rage
people
bait.
will respond and say like, "Oh, you didn't write this correctly," because that would be indication of the actual readership or viewership and so on. So that was an old school technique. When you look at your marketing right now, you said something earlier that's quite interesting, that you didn't just use marketing to promote all cases. You looked at your best cases, and it sounds like you were quite intentional. Let's get more of those as opposed to just anything. Today, now that you have the system up and running, you have a marketing team in-house that's supporting you, you have the external help. What are the KPIs that you're keeping top of mind when you are assessing marketing strategy?
Yeah, there's a few. So the way my charts are set up are between, I've got for each line of business going from left to right, it starts the total number of intakes, which is just everyone who reaches out to us. Then the number of matters created, which is the number of people who are actually reaching out to us for the right reasons, which is basically the people who aren't car insurance and Social Security. From there, I assess the number of retainers sent. So that's the number of people we wanted to sign up. And next to that chart is the number of retainers signed. So that's the first line of KPIs that I assess as far as marketing is how many people we're bringing in, how many of those people are good, and how many are actually signing up. And then on the back end, what I'm doing is, again, a line by line assessment of the average value per case, average settlement value, number of cases resolved in that year, and assessing the salaries for each department, and then allocating overhead equally amongst them. So the main KPIs basically are the number of retainers signed and the value per retainer signed and number of cases settled. We're not, we've implemented a lot of informal measures to try and get value per case up, mostly to avoid, there's so much risk involved with some of these cases that to take a low value case can really set you back. And we've learned some very hard lessons, unfortunately, over the last few years with losing some tough cases that we shouldn't have taken in the first place. But I've talked to some other lawyers who basically set floors where they will not take a case under X amount of money. Mm-hmm. We're not there yet because we see so many cases that are low value that someone wants to pursue because it's worth pursuing. And the one upside of our cases is often if you win, you get attorney's fees. And that's not always the case in every area of law. The other KPIs are we're doing like individual assessments of how many ChatGPT cases we're signing up, how many AI cases, or how many Reddit cases, all those number of referral sources. But definitely the biggest ones per month are number of retainers sent and signed. Comparing it to prior years and comparing it to lines of business.
That's quite comprehensive. And I think I like that you mentioned that you're also looking at the salary of cases involved and the average case. It's still shocking to me how often in a conversation I will say, what's the average case value for this matter? And the answer I get is it depends, which tells me that this is just not being measured and nobody knows. What would be your one advice to a law firm that's still mostly reliant on referrals for them to get started the right way into getting non-referral clients?
So I think it'd be a few things. So first, if you start small, don't just try to jump in and claim the entire market because you'll lose. Everyone else is out there already. So if you're going to try and, create a slice of internet, make it intentional. If you're a firm that specializes in one area of law, like hammer that specialization in areas where there isn't someone with that specialization, but be intentional about it. If you're a general practitioner, you have to know there's going to be general practitioners out there everywhere. Make sure you're advertising in geographic locations that are underserved or that you think you have low competition. Make sure your Google profile is ready to be seen by people. Don't go start a pay-per-click campaign if your Google average star rating is 2.7 stars. You're not going to get any business. And that's another, we have a 4.9 rating over 7 years. We have put a lot of effort into asking happy clients for Google reviews, managing the profile, responding to people who post. And that's the foundation of our success. And the only way we're able to do pay-per-click so aggressively. If it wasn't that way and people clicked on our website and then saw our competitor who has 4.9 stars and we have 4.2, we're spending money for no reason. So make sure you're ready to enter. Make sure you know what exactly you want to do. Make sure you're ready to give whoever you're trying to reach out to a superior customer service experience than the other people they reach out to. Know there's a chance. The chances are if they're calling you, they're calling 3 or 4 other people. The best way to immediately make them want to call you back is to be nicer, is to be more understanding, is to appreciate the fight they're going through, is to be empathetic, at least in my line of business. Maybe it's not the same with divorce law or other areas of law or criminal law, but from my perspective, when people call me and they get a sense that I'm pissed off about what Unum did or what Hartford did, and then I understand how frustrating what they're dealing with is, they understand that we know this area of law and we're excited to fight for them. So that's often going to be a deal breaker. Also, ask one of the smartest things I did recently, ask AI about your proposed fees in your area and ask them what competitors in your area are also charging. AI might give you some really interesting information. I lost a few clients to other lawyers in a very short span, and a lot more of them were from AI, and that doesn't usually happen to me. So I asked AI, what do you think about our fee structure? And it actually criticized it as being arguably predatory because we took too much off the back end, which was a debate among lawyers all the time. A lot of lawyers do it. And I changed our fee structure as a result. And to basically, I didn't necessarily agree with what ChatGPT said, but I realized if this is what potential clients are seeing, where they're calling this particular thing we do unethical or unfair, we've got to stop doing it. And it's not a massive financial hit. I rearranged things so it doesn't actually hurt us that badly, but it was a very clear lesson. And since then, I don't think I've lost a single client to another law firm for the same reason, where we got undercut with fees. So those are my quick tidbits.
Those are great pieces of advice, Andrew. Thank you. Where can somebody find you and learn more about Kantor and Kantor online?
Our website is www.kantorlaw.net. I'm also on Reddit as the Great K if you want to message me on Reddit. But yeah, our website's www.kantorlaw.net, or you can Google Kantor and Kantor with a K. My email address is akantor@kantorlaw.net. If you want to email me for any reason, I'm always around and available.
Amazing, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.